Let's bring in Behnam Ben Taleblu. He is a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, coming to us today from our studios in Washington. Behnam, always good to have you on. What do you make of what we're seeing, first of all, in Iran today, this outpouring of grief, protest, and anger against the United States?
Well, Todd, great to be back with you. The protests, or I should say rather, those who came out to mourn Soleimani, it's difficult right now to aggregate how much support the regime has because these mourners follow recent protests in Iran in over 100 cities. These, I think, are more of the pro-regime crowd, as well as those who may have been coerced or felt compelled to go out for fear, a classic tactic in most authoritarian states. Nonetheless, Qassam Soleimani was a rather charismatic Quds Force commander. He is the one responsible for Iran's regional security strategy, and he was loved by the pro-Iran Iraqi and Syrian Shia militias that Soleimani helped cobble together into this axis of resistance, is what the Islamic Republic calls it. And so those who were fans of Soleimani were mourning, but the vast majority, I think, of the region is taking a breath, a reprieve from the violence and the instability that this man has helped underwrite for over 2 decades.
The other thing, too, is let's talk a little bit about him and what he was responsible for. I mentioned trying to make sure that Iran was a regional superpower in the region. But, you know, there are those who say he was calling the shots in many different countries in that region and was responsible for a lot of asymmetrical warfare against the Americans, against the Israelis, against the Lebanese, and on, against the Saudis as well.
And the collateral damage in between all of those groups and nation states that you mentioned, of course, are the countless Muslims and innocent civilian populations that were subject to the pressure policies and the tug of war of Iran and any of the other countries that you mentioned, whether that was in the Iraqi theater, in the Syrian theater, in the Lebanese theater, or even in far-off places such as Yemen, where Iran historically doesn't have that kind of access or influence. Soleimani is someone, again, responsible for this regional security strategy. Even under the peak of sanctions starting in the mid-2000s, he helped bait and bleed the U.S. deeper into the war in Iraq and is responsible for countless coalition deaths.
The other thing I'm curious about is what you think Iran might do. And it seems like experts are sort of split. Some say that Iran must retaliate, must do something, not only for national pride, but also because a man considered the #2 guy in the country was killed by the Americans. On the other hand, there are those who are saying Iran has to be very careful here, and they may not retaliate as hard as people think they might.
Well, looking at Iran's security policy and how they've managed escalation dynamics before, option B, something in between, is exactly the way they'll be threading the needle on this if I had to be a betting man moving forward. You know, the death of Qassam Soleimani was absolutely irrelevant to the fact that Iran and America were going to be continuing their game of strategic competition in 2020. For Iran, that meant anyway escalating in the Persian Gulf, on the nuclear file, and on the various theaters of regional competition, such as Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Bahrain, and Yemen, that already have the U.S. on one side and the Iranians and its various proxies and militias and partners on another side. So 2020 was bound to be a flashpoint anyway. Now, of course, it's just grown in magnitude, and the potential for miscalculation, obviously, actually grows. But the Iranians have every incentive right now to be informed by their strategic competition with America to escalate in a way that doesn't cost them more ruin. We know the Trump administration now has enforced its red line of if an American is killed, it will respond with force, and it's escalated that by going after the most important military figure in modern Iranian history under the auspices of the Islamic Republic.
Iran has a far more sophisticated military than the United States has faced in recent years, whether it is their armed forces, their missile technology, their intelligence, and on it goes. Could we stumble into an open conflict here? What do you think?
I think it's clear that leaders on both sides, whether it's Trump in the United States or Khamenei in Iran, don't want an outright open conventional war. But nonetheless, Khamenei, who is the supreme leader of Iran, he follows the school of the founding father of the Islamic Republic, Khomeini, who nonetheless, despite knowing how conventionally weak Iran was relative to the U.S., still pushed the boundary. And the goal is to keep pushing the boundary and make it politically costly for America to respond. But now, after 40 years, America is responding. So right now, the question is, how tolerant of risk will Khamenei be in 2020? And how clear or how unpredictable will Trump be in 2020?
We are very happy to have you on here, Behnam, and thank you for taking the time to give us your take on the story.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.